Hi everyone, Guyde here, and today we're going to talk about bisexuality. Now before we get into that topic, I just want to give a quick shout out to my small but growing community of subscribers and commenters out there. You guys are awesome. I love the conversations we're having. I love the questions you guys have. You guys are the reason why I make these videos, so keep it up. In fact, it was a discussion in the comments section that really made me want to move this video up in my list. Because it seemed like there were a lot of questions about bisexuality and a lot of misperceptions. So I wanted to make sure that I gathered my thoughts on it. I talked to my bisexual friends and put this video together for you guys quickly. I want to start with some basic thoughts on sexuality and labels. I think it'll help both with this topic and with a lot of future topics I'm going to cover on this channel. And to do that, I want you to think about all the little pieces of information that apply to you. What are the things, all the things that you like your favorite color or your favorite food, and all the things that you dislike. So the food that makes you gag or the band that you hate. What about your physical attributes, like your height and your eye color, or your abilities, like your ability to play sports or music or video games. The decisions you make about your appearance, so the way you cut your hair and the clothes you wear, and how you express yourself, like your voice and your handwriting. And what are the things you find funny? What are the things that make you sad? What are the things that make you mad? So the list goes on and on, all these little pieces of information that basically you have one set of unique answers that makes you you. And think about all the other people that are around you, and they have their own set of answers to all of these questions. And a lot of them may be the same as yours, and you may share a lot of common likes and dislikes with your friends and your family, but I bet a lot of the answers are different as well. And really the important thing is to keep in mind that just because their answers are different than yours doesn't make them better or worse, or right or wrong. They're just different from yours. And you really need to understand that people are individuals. They make their own decisions. They have their own choices, their own likes, their own dislikes. And sexuality is much the same way. It's just as complicated of a topic as all the other things that make up you. There's what people look for in a relationship, what they like in them, what they dislike in relationships and people, what they like as far as sex goes, what they dislike as far as sex goes. Their physical appearance, the augmentations that they choose to make about their physical appearance, their abilities, their experience, the things that we find sexy, the things that turn us off. Again, the list goes on, and it's a very complex and very intricate sort of topic. And just because someone's answers to a lot of these questions are different than yours doesn't make them better or worse. It just makes them different. And you just got to keep that in mind and try not to judge people for their answers. And now labels basically try and take one set of answers to specific questions and apply a word to them. So everyone who answers these specific questions in this specific way should be called this word. And that word never covers all of the questions. And a lot of times someone can answer 99% of those questions the same way that everyone else in the label does, but maybe this one question that they answer is a little different. Now, does that mean that they're not that label? That they don't get to call themselves that because that one question is different? No, that doesn't make any sense. They're almost completely associated with this label. There's just one difference for them. They can choose to associate with that label if they want. What about someone who answers 90% of the questions the same, or 80? What about 75% of the questions the same? There clearly are a lot of similarities between this person and this label, but there are clearly some differences as well. Does that mean they don't get to associate with that label because there's 25% difference? And does that mean they get their own label to apply to those answers to the questions, the differences that they have? And then once you have that new label that's associated with a set of answers, then you start the comparison all over again. And you find someone else who may be almost that label, but has their own slight differences because they answered some questions differently. And it really can go on, and you can generate label after label after label to figure out all those little tiny intricacies. And in the end, you wind up with a label for every person on the planet, because everyone is different. So how do we deal with it? Basically, the answer is that people get to choose the label that they think most closely fits with their set of answers. And I think the key thing to remember there is that the person gets to pick which label they associate with. You don't get to pick it for them. You can't say, hey, you answered question 34B this way, so you should be this label. That's not how it works. They learned about that label, they know what's going on inside their head, and they decided that this is the label that they mostly closely associate with, and that's the one they're going to choose to call themselves. Some people may never get to that point, but they may never find a label that matches all the answers that they want to associate with themselves, and so they don't pick one, and that's perfectly fine as well. And bisexuality is another one of these labels. It's a label that's most commonly associated with someone who can answer the question, do you have attractions to both men and women? But there are so many other questions out there that aren't asked that could be part of that label. So don't be surprised if you find one bisexual who's very different from another. So getting into the bisexual label, I want to start with a very simple statement that they do exist. This is a very common misconception that bisexuals don't exist, that they're either straight or gay and they're on their way to one end or the other, and that's simply not true. I don't really understand why this is so hard to understand as well. We know that straight people exist, and straight people have attractions to the opposite sex, and gay people exist and they have attractions to the same sex. So it shouldn't be that hard to believe that one person can have attractions to both the opposite and the same sex. So yeah, they do exist. And there are actually many different sort of subtypes of bisexuals as well. Some have the ability to be attracted to and get turned on by both men and women equally. Some have relationship or sex preferences that are stronger one way or the other. For example, one of my good friends is a bisexual, and he can be sexually attracted to both men and women. He can get turned on by a beautiful woman, and he can also get turned on by a hot guy. And he's been in relationships and had sex with both men and women. And throughout his life, he's learned that he prefers relationships with men. And that doesn't make him gay. He's still a bisexual. The attraction to both men and women is still there. He just prefers to have relationships with men. And I think that's a big difference between your orientation and your actions. And I think it's important to remember that for most bisexuals, their level of attraction to one sex has nothing to do with their level of attraction to the other sex. So someone who is really turned on by guys can also be really turned on by girls just as equally. You don't take away from one to add to the other. Now back to bisexuality. As I discussed in my video about coming out, trying to discover your sexual orientation can be difficult and confusing, and everyone's journey is different. And for a lot of people, their journey takes them on through a pit stop of bisexuality on their way to discovering that they're gay. And this isn't done with bad intent, and it's very understandable. If you grew up thinking that you were straight and you're trying to discover that maybe you're not, bisexuality is just sort of a natural pit stop on the way to being gay. But it's important to remember that just because some people use this as a pit stop doesn't make it a pit stop. There are plenty of people who make it to bisexuality and discover that that fits them. They are bisexuals, and that's their final destination. They're not still on their way to being gay. They're not going to go back to being straight. They just discover that this is who they are, a bisexual. And the fact is that it's a pit stop is just one of the many myths and stereotypes around bisexuals. Others are, if a bisexual is in a relationship with one sex, they're more likely to cheat with that person with the other sex. And again, this simply isn't true. Bisexual attractions are the same as straight attractions and gay attractions. A gay man can be in a committed relationship and still have attractions to people that aren't his partner. And the same is true of bisexuals. Bisexuals can be in a committed relationship with one person and still have attractions to other people. This is not a specialized trait because they're bisexual. And it doesn't make them any more or less likely to cheat. If someone cheats on you, it's because they're an asshole. It's not because they're a bisexual. There are lots of other stereotypes, like bisexuals are greedy because they like both sexes. It's silly. That they're liars and deceitful. And again, these are not traits of bisexuals, these are traits of people. Whether someone lies to you or is deceitful is because that's that person. It has nothing to do with their sexual orientation. And unfortunately, a lot of these stereotypes and misperceptions make a lot of people say that they wouldn't date a bisexual, and that's really silly. If the idea that your partner has attractions to a sex that's not your own and that turns you off, then, that's your prerogative. I can't really judge you for liking things and disliking things. A lot of times you don't get to control that. But just make sure that you're not feeling that way because you're making a generalization of a stereotype and applying it to a whole group of people. Now, before we finish up, I just want to touch on a couple other labels that are closely associated with bisexuality and sometimes can get confused with it. The first one is pansexuality. So a pansexual is someone who is attracted to a person regardless of their gender. And that may sound very similar to bisexuals who are attracted to both men and women, but pansexual attraction is a little more broad. Basically the gender doesn't come into play. So pansexuals can be attracted to gender-neutral people. They can be attracted to transgender people or hermaphrodites. Basically just gender doesn't come into play when they think about attraction. And another term is sexually fluid. So sexually fluid people, their sexual preferences can change greatly over time throughout their life. Now, while many sexually fluid people identify with the label bisexual as well, and many bisexuals also identify with the label sexually fluid, not every bisexual is sexually fluid. Lots of bisexuals have one set of attractions and they don't change over time. Bisexuals are individual people. They're just as complex and intricate as you and me. They have their own set of answers to those questions that may differ from bisexual to bisexual. But they deserve our understanding and respect just as much as anyone else in this community. And really that's all I have for you today. I tried to cover as much as I could, but I am sure there are still lots of questions. So let's get started down in the comments below. Don't forget to like my video and subscribe to my channel to stay up to date with upcoming topics. And keep those questions coming. You can leave questions in the comments below, or you can email me at thegayguide@gmail.com. And in the meantime, get out there and be who you needed growing up.